Hi guys, welcome back to Giant Talk, the world's first OKR podcast in partnership with Cowan, the dedicated OKR software. Today you join us for a conversation all about cross-functional OKRs, and this is another episode in our OKR Toolkit we've made really accessible for people to get started with OKRs. I'm going to ask Roger to do another intro for me, a really brief one, because everyone knows who you are now, but you've just got to say who you are again for me.
Yeah, I'm Roger. I'm the founder of There Be Giants. We've been going for 10 years. We've been doing OKR for 6. Work all around the world with clients, both large and small, and OKR implementations. There you go.
Perfect. Brief, I like it. And I'm Jenny. I'm your Giant Talk host for today. So let's dive into cross-functional OKRs. So what do we mean by cross-functional?
Okay, so with the majority of organizations, they are still structured in a very functional, perhaps you might say hierarchical way, which has its pluses and minuses. But what we mean by cross-functional is, in terms of OKRs, we mean OKRs that are set in such a way so as to bring together a team of contributors that comprises of people from more than just one function. And this is quite a departure from the traditional management by objective practices that have been used in previous decades, where you've seen, objectives set at company level and then them set at, functional or department level, and then them cascaded all the way through those functions or departments. And whilst on the face of it, that might sound like, why wouldn't you do that? Because that sounds like it's pretty logical. The risk of doing it that way is that when you get to the end of the period and everything rolls back up to the top, you've got no way of knowing until that point as to whether things align, whether you're going to, be able to achieve what it is that you'd set at company level. And consequently, you end up with, whilst the period is running, loads of activity running in isolation in each function or department, which effectively is why we call them silos, because to all intents and purposes, there's literally hard walls either side of those departments. And there are also sometimes financial barriers in the way, because there might be budgets that could get in the way of, one person in one department who's being paid for by that department working on something that is being shared with another department. So sometimes there could be like internal financial barriers, particularly around budgets and cost allocations, which need to be ironed out to make this practical. But without doubt, it is absolutely critical if an organization is going to be truly responsive and agile. And if they're going to really fully commit to OKRs, they need to really embrace cross-functional OKRs. And the thing I talk about that leads to cross-functional OKRs is that if you have cross-functional OKRs, you'll have them because your objectives are being guided correctly, and as they should be, by the priorities in your strategy, not by the structure of your organization. Yeah. And that means that you have a much greater chance of building focus, and you've got a much greater chance of then, achieving the priorities that you've set for yourself. So that's what we mean by cross-functional.
So when we talk about cross-functional, are you advocating that everyone should be working in tribes and squads, or no?
Yeah, I mean, Spotify have made that really sexy, haven't they? And no, not necessarily. I'm not saying it's a bad thing.
Yeah,
it's a huge investment if you want to make that. One of our clients, tribes and squads, it's very, very tech company type thing. However, we are seeing those sorts of structures emerge in far more mature sectors. Like we worked with a bank in Argentina last year, And they have, across all 10,000 employees, they've moved to away from a departmental structure to a tribes and squad structure. Hats off to them. That's a hell of an investment to make and a massive reorganization. And they've put OKRs in there as well to support that, and it's going really well. But you don't have to make that level of investment to gain, the cross-functional benefits that you can get from OKRs. You can still have your functions. It's just that you open your mind and allow, as an organization, your goal structure to step away from your organizational hierarchical structure. Yeah. Certainly the goals that are focusing, and I would imagine these are probably the most important goals in the organization, that are focusing on whatever's going to drive growth or change or innovation. So, I don't believe that you need to, fully commit to tribes and squads, but you can still get that cross-functional benefit, even if you're still working in a relatively hierarchical structure. I mean, I delve into an example from my former lifetime when I used to work in corporate, and this is going back 10 or 15 years now. And the organisation had what was known as professional communities. So there's 15,000 people in the UK. There was definite functions. There was a definite functional structure to the business, but we had professional communities that kind of ran horizontally. And each one of those professional communities was home to a particular people who all had a particular discipline. So there'd be one for project managers, there'd be one for technical architects, there'd be one for sales, and so on and so forth. And it wasn't quite the tribes and squads that Spotify has. It was going in that direction. Okay. So this is so Spotify. Yeah. Okay. They've been public about what they've done, and it's great because it has inspired a lot of organizations to become more agile. But I could see the foundations of those types of structures, those types of matrix structures, really starting to emerge 15, perhaps even 20 years ago. So I guess what I'm saying is it's not a massively new principle.
Yeah Okay. So something you mentioned a little bit earlier, and something I just want to revisit on, is silos. Yeah. So we hear this word bandied about, but what's the problem with them?
Yeah, well, silos. You can often find that, particularly in very functionally aligned organisations where the hierarchy is still very strong, you get a lot of people that kind of become quite native to their part of the business.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can see a bit of them and us starting to happen. Sometimes this is driven by, as I was saying before, certain financial mechanisms that are put in place around budgets. I'm protecting my budget, so therefore you're not having any of my people. And what that means is that where you have a priority which needs genuine collaboration, you can find that sometimes people can become quite protectionist, quite political, and that gets in the way of that priority being achieved, either in the sense that it stops it or it certainly slows it down. So, silos. I've yet to hear anybody speak fondly of silos. Everybody, I think, who hears that word, and certainly in my experience so far, has kind of relates to it, and no one usually has a good thing to say about it.
And I suppose as well, just talking on silos, I suppose it's almost that kind of two heads are better than one. So if you're working in silos and you've got a project or an OKR, for example, and there's someone in another team that could be really beneficial to help the progress of that, and if it's kind of silo driven, then there may be not that opportunity to, say, like, you work cross-functionally. So it's almost like you're missing out, it feels like.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. That's a very good point. And it is about having the really, the key people on that team. And it's so powerful when it happens. Powerful when it happens.
Koan is a purpose-built solution for managing your OKRs. Helps your team achieve their objectives and key results, helps them get aligned, and it helps them stay engaged. Shared spreadsheets simply don't scale when you're using OKRs properly, and you're not going to have a maximum impact with them. But with Koan, you can scale your OKRs right across your entire company, keeping your team super motivated and moving everybody in the right direction. Roger, what's one of your favourite features about Koan?
So the thing that I really love about Koan, and have done ever since I first saw it, was how it really puts the conversation around OKRs at the heart of the system, and it really helps stimulate that, which obviously brings really good collaboration. They've got this reflections feature which helps individuals really prepare for the team conversation which is going to come up, where the collaboration is going to take place. So that would definitely be the thing for me, which is the killer feature of the system.
So in terms of an OKR, what does a cross-functional one look like?
Okay, so I'll use an example, if I may. So again, this is from another client, another project that we did last year. And the scenario before OKRs was sales had a target to sell a product.
Yeah.
And this was a technology business, by the way, had to sell a product. But the product teams who were developing the software hadn't actually completely released that product. So sales had nothing to sell, even though they had a target.
Right.
So sales were feeling quite vulnerable about this because they were getting measured on something which they had no control over, no influence over, and so on and so forth. And so there'd be quite a bit of ball throwing, that would happen, or rather more like brick throwing between the two teams. And, why haven't you delivered? Well, we're doing it on our own time and we're doing it as quickly as possible. And, products weren't being particularly outcome focused. If people have listened to the previous episode, would have heard me talk about the real value of outcome focused key results. They were just focused on delivering it. They weren't focused on actually the sales that it then went ahead and generated, the revenue that it generated. So when they decided to put OKRs in place, one of the things that was done was to create a shared OKR around the delivery and the impact of this particular product, and that meant that then required a number of people from products and a number of people from sales to come together and be key contributors. So they owned specific key results under this objective. There was a leader. An objective leader, who is the person who kind of just makes sure the team is brought together, that the team has everything they need, that they're cutting through any barriers that might be in the way, and that they've got what they need to do the job. But then it's the key contributors who are kind of owning key measures around this. But the point is that they have something that they are united behind, that they're now sharing. And I've talked in earlier conversations about how important routine and of conversation is, and that there should be a habit of conversation around this. So that team was actually getting together every 2 weeks to look at those metrics and look at those levels of confidence. And the result was that some significant breakthroughs were made in the level of collaboration and the speed as well at which they managed to get that product to market compared with how long it had taken previously.
Yeah.
So sales were happier because they weren't quite feeling as exposed, and also products were starting to become more aware of the actual impact that their work was having. So there's that whole purpose-driven thing that was starting to come into it. So everyone was winning, but the difference was that the organization had decided to shift its way of setting objectives from, instead of just setting an objective for sales and an objective for product, it brought them together under a common one, under a shared one.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I think probably we've got listeners at the moment that are probably listening to this thinking that's what we need is cross-functional OKRs.
Yeah.
So how would they go about building them?
Right.
And any kind of top tips, I guess, around that?
Yeah. So there's a key point in the objective building for an organization where it's very easy to go one way or another. And that point is, once you've created the company level OKRs, the one way or another point comes straight after that, because it's then what do you do for that first level of 3-month OKRs or 4-month or whatever your cycle is going to be. But what do you do for that first cycle's worth of OKRs?
Right.
Because the people that have been involved in creating those company OKRs are typically, the C-suite, the exec team, the heads of, and they're all sat around the table and they all kind of want to step forward and, show some willingness to take ownership and say, yeah, my team can do this, my department can do this, my function can do that. And whilst that may sound good, I mean, it's, people like to see others, stepping up and taking responsibility. That then inadvertently then reinforces the silos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can see that, yeah.
So to avoid that, the question to ask is, okay, out of these 12-month OKRs, what are the priorities that are arising out of them? And what could we do? Whether you want to call them projects or initiatives or whatever you want to call them, but what is it that we could do over the next cycle to make progress against on these company OKRs? Mm-hmm. And when you've gone through that process of working out what those ideas are, you can kind of funnel those down into, select the chosen few, and then you can develop your OKRs around them. And there's a high degree of probability that those will be cross-functional. Yeah, and because you're being guided by the priorities, you're not kind of coming at this from, right, what can ops do, what can sales do, what can finance do. You're coming at this from, actually, what is it we could do as an organization to drive this? Yeah. And the example being before, launch a new product. Well, actually, launching a new product includes a number of different capabilities, number of different functions within the business. So therefore, who are the key contributors that we need? And so once you've established that and you've kind of got your objective and you can kind of map that across all the different core activities that you have across the organization, which can include, functions, departments, squads, tribes, whatever. Mm-hmm. You kind of map them across and you say, right, how does this look? What's the level of contribution that each of these areas need to make? And then that then helps build up a picture from a resourcing point of view as to the load on each area. So you can have an adult conversation around, an informed conversation around whether that area actually has the capacity to support, the demands that you're going to be placing on it, or whether you actually might need to defer one of the OKRs until the cycle after this current one or this upcoming one. But it also gives you a very clear steer as to which of the areas you should be inviting contributors from to help form the teams and build up the rest of the key results. And there you go. You've then got yourself a cross-functional OKR.
Amazing. And I suppose just when I'm listening to you kind of talk about that, then it's kind of very much about having the right people work on a project rather than just the people that are available, if that makes sense. Kind of.
Yeah. It is about having the right people. And like I said, it's that kind of pause to say, right, okay, this is what we want to do over the next 3 or 4 months. Who is it, or which areas do we need contributors from? Mm-hmm. And therefore, who is it we should have on those teams?
Yeah.
Great.
And so I suppose a company might set up these cross-functional OKRs, and then think about how can they continue to grow cross-functionally is probably something they'd probably ask. So how can they continue to do that in the future?
So, in terms of cross-functionality, I mean, I think, as I said at the beginning, you can, go whole hog and invest in completely restructuring your organization to something like tribes and squads and so on, if you wish. But I think that just using some cross-functional objectives at what we would call level 2, which is the ones that set the priorities for the upcoming 3 months or 4 months or however long your cycle is. I think that's all you kind of need to start off with, because that then guides the rest of the activity. I don't necessarily think that you need further cross-functional teams beneath those.
Okay.
Certainly not necessarily to start with. It may, as your use of OKRs develops and your confidence as an organization grows with them, it may be that you decide to have beneath those cross-functional OKRs further cross-functional OKRs. But I think let's be sensible here. For some organizations, this is a major mindset shift. And this is a major organizational shift, and there could be quite a lot of resistance that you have to overcome in the organization. I'm not saying that that's necessarily people standing in the way of it, but like I alluded to earlier, I think there could be systems and processes that have been running for years and years and years that just reinforce that the hierarchical structure, which kind of need to be maybe flexed and challenged and flexed and changed. And that's not necessarily going to happen overnight. Hell, you might even set an OKR to try and change and flex them. Who knows? But I think if you're, I think it's a case of trying out the ones at the top of the cycle, the ones that are guiding the cycle in a cross-functional way, and seeing how that runs, and then using the reflections at the end of your quarterly cycle to check in and see whether has the process worked for us. Is it delivering value? Is anything getting in the way of it? How could we make it better? Is there anything we need to stop or stop doing as a result of this? So in terms of, to come back to your question about how do we continue to grow cross-functionality, I don't think there's any one answer to that other than continually reflect and continually ask yourself whether is how we're working the best possible way we can work, and even if it's giving us great results, there's always room for improvement. So that killer question is, how could it be better? How could it be even better? Yeah. And like I said, some of those changes might be around organizational structures, processes, so on and so forth. And then, if you want to throw everything in, then you could go for the full Spotify structure if you wanted.
And I think just like reflecting on kind of that answer there, then what we've just spoken about, I would imagine as kind of cross-functionality becomes more culturally embedded and it just becomes more of the norm and like everyday business. It just becomes easier and easier, and that's where it grows naturally, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. So in many ways, it could be about the organization introducing the tools that support cross-functionality as well, cross-functional working. Which could be using, Microsoft have got all sorts of Teams tools now, and Slack's available, and so all that stuff which can help with sort of that short communication, which is available and to everybody in that particular team or that particular channel, rather than the just the one-to-one or one to a few of email. So that it could be about putting the right tools in place as well.
And I think especially given kind of the years that 2020 and 2021 looks like they're going to be, and probably the size of an organisation, if you work in an extremely large organisation, those tools, like you've said, are just becoming more and more important because potentially teams aren't seeing each other from 1 year to the next face to face at the moment. So like you say, really important for that cross-functional working.
Yes.
Great. So really fascinating discussion. Thanks for joining me today, Roger. Another great episode of Giant Talk on our Toolbox podcast. Next time we'll be talking about floodlight and spotlight. So join us for our next episode. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks now.